This is something staff is wanting to start bringing every retreat yearly. The reason why is it's the first part of our budget process, and although we'll have our 2035 plan in place going forward, and we have our 2025 plan, and we would tie back to that, the importance of having a touch point of understanding the sentiment of our public, I think, is very important from a transparency and accountability standpoint. So with that, we have Zencity here, and we have recently expanded our package with them to help us with our community survey. This is Josie Peary, and she's with Zencity. There are also, just wanted to point out that if you're looking on slides that you may have been sent previously, we made a few minor changes where we combined some of the slides together. All the information is exactly the same. We just thought it was easier so you didn't have to flip back and forth. So with that, I want to hand it off to Josie.
Yes. Hello. Good morning, everyone. Mayor, council, staff, community members. It's such an honor to be here. I want to start by saying I attend a lot of these meetings across the country, and the joy and community in this room this morning is really rare and really special. So I hope you all feel really proud of what you're doing here in the city, and it's a great honor to be here with you. I also want to quickly recognize James, and I think Claire said it greatly this morning. His fingerprint is in a lot of this work and a lot of what we're doing together. I heard from his team that they're wearing these Hawaiian shirts in honor of him today, and that's a really great call out, and we're just thankful for the time that we had with him. Zencity is a company that helps and supports over 400 different local government agencies across the country, and our goal is to really power the work of government with community voices. So we know that the work that you do is super, super important, and in order to do that effectively, it takes this whole room, it takes this whole city, and we need everyone to be brought to the table. You saw that prioritized as really having representative and inclusive community engagement, and that's what Zencity helps you do. But today it's really hard to get that type of engagement. We invest a lot of time, we invest a lot of money in going out, reaching out to our community, and often we end up with skewed results or a skewed view on what's going on in the community. I'll ask the room how often we answer those spam likely phone calls that are community surveys via telephone, or if you get emailed a 20-page packet or mailed actually physical snail mail, 20-page packet of questions that you then need to fill out, find stamps, mail back. It's not happening, and we find less than a 3% response rate on those traditional methods. Also, you guys are lucky to have some very positive public comments this morning. That was great to hear. But on average, we find across council meetings, about 64% of public comments are negative or are against the decisions that the city is making, no matter what those decisions are. And so while these numbers are a little bit scary, I won't read them off to you. You can create your own fear factor here. But the truth is that our community is more and more online than ever. We find over 95% of US adults are actively on the internet. And even if they don't have internet access at home, they're using it at work, at community centers, at the beautiful Lewisville Library. And that is the best way to reach out to folks. So Zencity has designed a method that reaches out to a statistically representative sample size of your population to solicit feedback and responses, and then analyzes that to help power the work and the decisions that you make. Our kind of strategic framework in doing this, and I would say remember some of these points. We're going to come back to them a little bit later on some strategic steps that we can be taking as a city. But our framework here is essentially reaching and going beyond those loudest voices to really get to the heart of the average Lewisville resident, the average citizen living in the community. We want to understand what they think about what we're doing. Are they happy? Where are their concerns? What are the big items that they want us to focus on? And then taking in that understanding, we then need to take action. It's not enough to just listen, acknowledge. We need to take those action steps and put things into place. And as we take those actions, we then want to reach again, we want to understand again, and we want to act again to make sure that we're constantly modifying, updating, and staying that data-driven community. I'll pause there for a second. Any questions from council staff about methodology or how we're doing this at this point? No? Okay. Well, let's dive into the community results. First, we're going to focus on listening to resident discourse. There's a lot of different words on this screen, so I just want to point out a couple of key highlights that I think are really indicative of the great work that you guys are doing in community engagement. First of all is that official channels led citywide discourse. I've probably given several hundreds of these presentations. That is rare, super rare. For the city to be the go-to place of resident discourse is incredible. It means that your community members trust you and trust those social media accounts to put out reliable, transparent information. So kudos to all of you. Kudos to your community engagement teams. It also has grown 44% since we presented these numbers from last year. Sentiment skewed strongly positive, with positivity measuring 10 times higher than negative. You'll notice those numbers 40 and 4 don't add up to 100. That's because there's a lot of noise that's just neutral. But when we really analyze for sentiment here, positive is greatly outweighing the negative in discourse happening around the city of Lewisville. The Lewisville Police Department was the top source of engagement. I saw the chief in the room, so that's great to see that people enjoy talking about public safety.
Talking about him.
Really just talking about, he's a great guy. I spent some time with him yesterday. Yeah. It's incredible. Also followed by Lewisville Fire Department. It was great to see in that video some of the things you guys are doing around fire safety. And Facebook really dominated resident discussion. But notably, next door discussion grew 100% from what we saw it last year. So conversations on next door are continuing to increase. I think a lot of times in the past, we've considered next door, I lost my dog or I'm looking for a babysitter. But we're seeing that narrative start to shift and people really coming to their local communities on that neighborhood scale to have conversations about what's happening in their neighborhoods.
Are you able to poke into that number? Because growing from one conversation to two is 100%. Growing from 100 to 200, do you have any idea the numbers behind the 100% change?
I don't have those exact numbers here.
You've got interactions right
Interactions is shown there, and you can see that 99.7%. So right now, you guys are getting about 25,000 different interactions on Nextdoor.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
We'll continue to monitor that for you as well. And then leading topics in the city were public safety, human relations and services, cultural affairs, and the local economy. I don't think any of those are a surprise for us, just based on the goals, things that you identified in Lewisville 2025. And it's important to note those key topics and continue to analyze them, see where they're changing, because that's really what those average residents are talking about, caring about, thinking about. We're now going to transition into our representative surveys. So these are surveys that we put out to the community, not just on social media, but through creative digital advertisement. So whether that's scrolling through social media, reading a recipe, reading the Bible app in Spanish on a phone, maybe even playing Candy Crush, hopefully not during council meeting, we can reach out to folks and solicit responses from them. And our residents can select a number between 1 to 5. So 1 is going to represent a very negative response to that question. 3 is neutral, and we specified to the residents. I'll note that neutral wasn't something that we previously captured in the city of Lewisville with some different survey methodologies, but having that option of neutral is really important. Some of our residents don't interact with some of the services that we provide or don't have a strong opinion about what we're doing in that area. So we give them the option to mark neutral. And then 5 being the most positive, a very positive response there. And I'll highlight overall residents are very happy with their quality of life in Lewisville. So you guys got 69% positive. If we combine that with the neutral, we're looking at 94% of residents saying they are positive about quality of life or neutral about quality of life, and less than 6% showing negative responses with overall quality of life in the city. You guys are at or above the national and cohort benchmarks in 11 of 14 characteristics, including things like public safety, which you're 4% above those national and cohort benchmarks, and affordable housing, 6% above those national benchmarks there. I think that's important, right? A number like 69% positive, for me, I was an A student and had very strict parents, so that number would have scared me. But when we look at national and cohort benchmarks, we're really seeing that you guys are well above what we see in our communities. So I want to call that out and commend you for that. And also, overall, 50% of residents are satisfied with all city characteristics, except for 3 of them. And those improvement areas include availability of affordable housing, ability to get jobs that pay a living wage, and ease of getting around by public transportation. We'll come back to some strategies to address those key areas. We'll dive in quickly here into the sample composition. I know one of your key goals for this year was to be more representative and more inclusive in your community engagement. So what you're gonna see on each of these with age, gender, and ethnicity is in that light blue bar, the actual responses unweighted, what we collected. We did apply a small amount of weighting to some of these categories to make sure that they are adjusted and in line to be representative with your population. And then the gray column there is the demographics of your population, 18 plus specifically. So I'll note that sometimes census demographics get a little bit confusing because we are reaching out to folks 18 plus in our survey, and that's what we want our numbers to represent here to really give you results that mean something. Yeah.
I think it's an important slide.
Please.
Back off the mic a little bit. This seems to be saying that there is a really good job done of making sure we hit our demographics as a proportion of our city and getting the survey results. So if 24% of our city was, or 26% is Hispanic Latino, 24% engaged. Is that what I'm seeing up there? Or is there something different?
So what you're seeing is 26% of the population in general is Hispanic Latino, 16% engaged, 16% of the respondents were Hispanic Latino, and we weighted that to 24% because when we analyze the 26%, that's the number that represents the over 18 plus population in the community.
So it looks like we're doing a great job engaging.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Excellent. So again, I just want to highlight here the great work you're doing. 69% of the 540 survey residents are very satisfied with overall quality of life in Lewisville. Overall quality of life is 1% higher than cohort and higher than the national score. You're going to see these 3 shapes, the blue circle, the black square, and the gray triangle on a couple of the slides moving forward. So that blue circle is always going to represent you in the city of Lewisville. The black square is going to be your cohort. We make up this cohort with communities that are similar to you in demographics. So when we look at age, ethnicity, income, and gender, we don't just want to look at cities with similar population or cities in the same geographic region. We want to look at cities that are like Lewisville, cities that have similar experiences to Lewisville, and that's how we get that cohort group. And the national average is our national benchmarking scores across the community. So overall quality of life, you'll see that 69% higher than national and higher than cohort. How likely are you to recommend Lewisville as a place to live? You guys skewed just a little bit lower than the national and cohort averages there. And then how likely are you to be living in Lewisville in 5 years from now? Online and in line there with the cohort average, slightly below that national average. But I think each of these numbers are pretty in line with what we're seeing across the board, and that's great to see. When we dive into some of the key characteristics, you'll see those benchmarks and continue to improve. Any questions on how we're benchmarking you here? All right. We wanted to highlight those last 2 questions specifically. So how likely are you to recommend Lewisville as a place to live? Again, that 63%, when we combine it with the neutral, is much, much higher. You're almost 90% there in that category, which is a great number to see. You guys did have a lot select neutral there. And then as well for the question of how likely are you to be living in Lewisville 5 years from now. Again, a large portion of the residents here selecting neutral, and that's okay. I don't think we should see that as a negative. I think that that's fair for people to say, I don't quite know where I'm going to live in the next 5 years, and select neutral for those questions. All right, let's dig into some of the key community characteristics. So on each of these slides, we're going to go in order from the top satisfaction score to the lowest. And we asked about a specific community characteristics. Then you'll see the satisfaction score, and then you'll see the benchmark on each of these characteristics individually. I want to point out before we get too far in, because I'm sure eyes will dart around the screen, there were 2 custom questions that were important to the city of Lewisville to ask. Those are not benchmarked on that national or cohort level, but I still think they give some important results about key focus areas of your community, so we included them here. The highest satisfaction score was quality of parks and recreational amenities, with over 90% saying they are positive or negative there. And you'll see that blue dot above both the square and the triangle there, showing that you guys are above the national and community averages. I think that goes to show all of the work that you guys are doing investing in parks and recreational amenities in the community. And then acceptance of residents of all backgrounds. This is one I think you should be very proud of. And you'll notice that blue circle moving even further to the right, showing some space on where you guys really excel in this area. So residents feel like they're accepted no matter where they come from, what they look like, who they are in the city of Lewisville. Access to quality healthcare services was also a very highly rated community characteristic here, with 66% saying positive and a higher number there neutral, but still getting that over 90% saying positive or neutral. And then quality of services provided by the city. This is really great to have 90% on just in general the quality of services. What that question really gets to is if I need something from Lewisville or I call the city of Lewisville, am I going to be satisfied with the results that I receive? And the answer is yes, I am going to be overwhelmingly satisfied there. So those 4 areas, we see you guys really excelling, being above both the benchmarks. Any comments or questions about those 4 areas? No? All right. Sense of safety also trended very highly and was above the community average, with 65% of residents selecting very positive, 20% in the neutral, and 15% in the negative. That is higher as well than our cohort and national averages. So another great thing to be proud of. Access to quality education, likewise, your cohort is just slightly higher in that area, but still you guys are skewing higher than the national average, which is great to see. And then one of your custom questions here is availability of public information about city operations. So our level of transparency, the availability of having that transparent documentation on what the city is doing. You guys had about 60% saying positive, 26% in that neutral, and only 14% in the negative. And then one of our focus areas that you'll see again is quality of waste and recycling services, with 59% saying positive, 25% in the neutral, and 16% in the negative. But that number was lower than what we see when we look at a national level and a cohort level. So even though it's seen as a highly rated item on our community characteristics, it is still lower than our national and cohort averages. And I know Claire has some ideas on how we're going to focus on that and some thoughts behind that number.
I did just want to pause because on this point, actually, there's 2 things on this slide I want to pause about. And obviously, when you put the survey out, can affect. So there are 2 things that are interesting, I don't believe had actually happened yet, and one that we had been struggling with as a community. So one for the bottom with the recycling services and waste pickup, we had a changeover in Castle Hills to Republic. We also had the difficulties of changing all the routes citywide. That really was a struggle. Trust me, I was getting calls from you guys on vacation, and I was actually out in alleys checking trash cans myself personally at one point. So it was that big of a of a deal to council and to the public. So I know that was a pain point over the last year. We want to keep an eye on that going forward. I'm not sure it won't resolve itself, but if not, then there is, we are going to have to do a focus on that.
We have this data point. I kind of like that we have this data point this year so we can see how that
Exactly.
changes.
Exactly. The other point is like on access to quality education, it doesn't look bad there. That was, I believe this was done before we heard all the stuff about LISD and closure of schools and things like that. I don't know if this was it. If we did a survey today, which we are currently, we have a survey out right now, if that doesn't change. So all this is to know is this is about sentiment, so it can change year to year, but it's really, we will build trends over time that will help us make better decisions.
Go ahead, Patrick.
No, you go ahead.
That's all right.
So I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking back to last year, I think, or the year before. I think we sent it out either during or right after the election, and there was a suspicion that a few people tended to skew artificially things very negative. So I was wondering about the timing of that. What did we learn from that experience, one? And then two, the availability of public information in city operations. That is so hard to understand. We if anything, I think we oversaturate because there's so much information out there. Once my email folder gets to be about 100 unread, I check out. I'm like, I'm done. I can't even go. Then I wonder if we may hit that tipping point where there's so much, people are confused about where to go. Because I think we do a really good job getting out there. I just don't know that people understand how to absorb it all. Might be something to look into.
Absolutely.
How much do you think weighs in on the availability of public information about our city operations is the pseudo account out there pretending to be City of Lewisville that's not, that is muddying the water and confusing people?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll say that we do not use that Facebook page in our survey responses here or in our analysis of your listening data. We're aware of the concerns around it. I think what is important on both of the points there is one of the things that we can do is continue to use this as a benchmark for yourselves moving forward and analyzing trends. So as we start to consolidate, as we start to develop better resources and better places to access that information, let's analyze how that score is moving and changing and make sure we're moving in a positive direction.
I wanted to clarify one thing. So we're not just ignoring for our own reasons. It's because it's a private page, like it's a group. So they just don't access groups like that if it's private.
Which, I mean, goes back to our previous slides on this. So I did have a question on methodology here. So Zencity comes up with a community survey. You ask these standardized questions, and then you allow your partners to ask a certain amount of custom questions. What is your methodology for, okay, when do we have enough people asking this same custom question that we would like to make that a standard question? Tell me a little bit about your process there.
Yeah, that's a great question, Mayor. So
I only ask great questions.
It's the standard. So we have a team of methodologists who have worked with ICMA and a couple of other local government organizations to develop these key benchmarking questions. And I'll share that this isn't as simple as these are just our partners that we ask these questions to. We actually run nationwide benchmarking surveys specifically to help get that benchmarking data. So it's not just these are the most innovative cities that work with Zencity. This is residents in general in the entire U.S. population. And it's 12 key characteristics that we measure, and then 14 on that broader scale that encompass what the majority of cities in the nation are focusing on. So those key things that those organizations have identified with us. Yeah, does that help answer and clarify?
It helps. Do you ever go, hey, I've seen this trend of custom questions that these cities are asking, that might be relevant to you? Do you guys share that back the other way?
We can, yes. Some of that we do anonymize just to protect the data of our different communities and what they choose to share. But absolutely, we're happy to provide results on other cities that are asking, for example, about availability of public information. If you guys want to know what other cities are seeing in that area, that's something we could happily provide to you.
I also think it's important because going back to the question you had before about the information about city operations, Councilwoman Cade. So it's like you can't, or if you're getting saturated, we don't know how we benchmark. But I will tell you, like in a few slides, you'll see what is the one thing that Lewisville government does well, and community engagement is one of them. And that is broken into public communication. So even though it may look lower, it's also what the public is saying we do really well. So I'm just food for thought.
I have a question as well. Do you happen to, whenever you're getting, we're talking about the age, gender, and ethnicity of the respondents, do we have any type of location data for where the responses are coming from, as far as, are we getting responses from, a little bit sprinkled all over the city, or are we getting heavy responses from one area versus another? Is there a data set that's not being captured by a certain area in the city? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now, the way that we do this in Lewisville is we get respondents from across the community. Our standard is to have that representative of the different areas, different districts, and make sure that the census data matches. So the number of residents should reflect in the survey responses. Lewisville right now doesn't have that mapped on like a map that you can see, but that's something we could work to produce for you so that you can see how these respondents vary across different geographic areas in the community.
Okay, I would love to see that, because I want to make sure that, we're getting a coverage across all districts of the city, because that for me personally, I feel, if I can have an understanding of where all the responses are coming from and making sure that there's not one specific area that's being left out, then I feel a lot more confident in what this data is telling me as well, and that we're not just asking one group and not another, or we're not getting responses from one group that might skew some of these results in a different direction.
Absolutely. And I can tell you with confidence that we are getting from all of those different districts, but let's work to establish a way to present that to you and be able to show that to you.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think diving down on the same point, because I think it's a really good one worth exploring, is this information, how does that also break down by those same demographics? So if we go back and we see quality of waste and recycling, 16% negative, well, 90% of that was Castle Hills because it went from 2 days to 1 day out there. That makes you think about it a little bit differently. If we find out that the sense of overall safety is, people that are 65 and up, maybe I think about how to address that concern differently than if it's 18 and under. So I think that same breakdown would be nice to see across these dimensions too.
Absolutely. We'll work to communicate that to you.
I did want to point out, though, while we're going through this, if you, in the appendix of your we won't go through the appendix later on, but they do have breakdown of like for example, if someone says, do you feel like it's Lewisville is well maintained, clean and well maintained? You can see the breakdown by age, by gender, and by income levels, and by ethnicity. So you can, in your presentation, you can.
Yeah, that data's in there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Right.
It's just it's geographic.
But we
is
don't
not.
have the geographic.
Geographic is not.
Perfect. Thank you.
I get a little bit nerdy with all the numbers, so your team had to dwindle me down. So we created that appendix for you guys to peruse on your own. I'll leave some business cards on the back table as well if you do have questions as you review that data.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, so this next slide is kind of the second half of those community characteristics, and these are where we found a little bit lower responses, but I want to again preference that a lower satisfaction score doesn't necessarily mean it's a key target area. What I'm saying there is there are some on this board that might be surprising to you, but you're still well above that national and cohort benchmark averages. I think that's important to keep in context. I'll share a personal story. I'm loving the weather because I am from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and we have a couple feet of snow on the ground. But it is ranked one of the cheapest and most affordable places to live in the United States. And when they conduct their community survey, they always get low satisfaction on affordable housing, right? We know that isn't the case. We know that isn't true just nationally. It's well above that national and cohort average. But but still the satisfaction score is low. So it's a great idea to identify these as better ways that we can communicate and make sure that the perception of these characteristics are well communicated to our population. And so overall cleanliness and maintenance is below the national and cohort averages here. We only had 17% saying negative, but still a little bit below what we'd like to be seeing in that key area. Sense of community among residents, you guys are right in line with your cohort average and above the national average. I think if I can be biased and say that's a Texas thing, Texas has a great way of building community. So you guys are pretty in line with that. The ability for residents to give input to the Lewisville City government. This is very exciting to be above the cohort and national average. I've never seen this in a community. For residents to feel like they have a voice in what you're doing and like they have a way to come and communicate their needs and concerns. Council, mayor, staff, that shows what a great job you guys are doing being accessible, being available to your community members. Availability of a variety of art and cultural events. I know we already put this on a list of things to discuss as you guys move forward and make those strategic priorities. But you guys are right in line with the cohort average, above the national average there. Only 15% of residents responded negatively to that question. The second custom question that you guys wanted to ask here was the availability of social services to assist the low-income, elderly, and disabled communities. While we don't have benchmarking data for that, I think it's important to note the high percentage of folks that rated neutral there. Again, the value of that neutral is that some might not know about the availability of those services because they've never needed them. And so having a neutral response there is good to see. And only 16% of residents responding negatively to that question. Availability of jobs that pay a living wage. So this is, again, another area where we had a lot of folks responding with a neutral response. Whether that's, they have always had the same job and they feel like that's livable to them. I do think in your cross-analysis, this is one of those questions that I would dive in a little bit more on how the demographics shake out. It's interesting to see the different responses based on income levels, specifically to that question, where the definition of a livable wage tends to be a little bit different based on the income bracket that you're in. So something to dive into, look a little bit more on your own there.
I just want to make that clear because this is a really interesting data point. When she's saying your income levels might drive what you think, so you would think the lower income bracket is actually saying we don't have a living wage. It's actually, you'll see a skewing more negative when you make $150,000 and above in our community. They believe there's not a living wage. So that led us to think, well, maybe people don't understand what living wage is. Maybe it's saying there's not higher paid jobs for people that are making $150,000 a year. That could possibly be what the data is telling us. It's just conjecture, but an interesting data point.
Awesome. Availability of affordable housing, again, being one of your lower community characteristics here on satisfaction score, but you're going to notice that blue dot above both that national cohort average. Again, a very similar situation to my own where folks might respond negatively there, but we're seeing you do a lot better than what we see across the board nationally. And then ease of getting around by public transportation. That is another of the focus areas that we identified for the city with the highest rate of negative respondents there and that number being below the national and cohort averages. I know that you guys are doing a lot around public transportation, so we're going to continue to monitor that and identify it as you make changes. Yeah, Mayor, it looked like you had a comment there.
I'm gonna give some context to that one because yesterday was board meeting day for TJ, and DCTA board actually got an update from our social media team. So some pieces to understand. They're aware that they're trying to figure out why some of the themes that are prevalent around public transportation here in North Texas, and especially with DART and the conversation going on with DART. So there's a lot of negativity in general that's out there. But over the last 6 months, DCTA has really doubled down on their outreach. They've had over 1 million impressions this past 6 months through their social media. They've increased their video by 375%. They've increased their engagements by 144%. They've increased their total number of published reports in the second 6 months. They had over 239 more published posts than they did in the first half of last year. So really working to engage people where they are. We're starting to see trends that show that DCTA assessments are actually starting to move positively. People are feeling like they're getting the information that they need. And I think most importantly on the social media side is that they're telling the stories about the people and the employees of DCTA and not just the raw data of the train moves every 12 minutes. It's much more about the train moves people this way and here's how you can do it. Now, this next year, the agency is also intending to move the customer service in-house. So if you have an issue with getting ridership information, when you call today, that is typically a third party that is giving that feedback. Moving next year, they're going to move that in-house, so we're going to have a contact center here specifically in Lewisville that will help people deal with any challenges that they have, and I think that's going to actually improve that ridership metric as well. So while we as a city don't have as much movement or the ability to maybe change that, our partner agency DCTA is doing the right work on the social media and on the comms side, I think, to be able to see that pivot. So I'm looking forward to that information and how that'll work.
I did want to give some personal anecdotes because I'm trying to understand the data related to affordable housing as well as the ease of getting around by public transportation. And just, my oldest daughter is wanting to to buy a home in a downtown area where it's walkable. And so Lewisville, Old Town Lewisville is on her list. Of course, I'm voting for that one. But she has been sending me houses in all the different downtowns, downtown Plano, downtown Grapevine, Lewisville, and the amount of house she can buy is far greater in downtown Lewisville and Old Town Lewisville. And so while we say that, don't get me wrong, affordable housing is an issue for everyone. It's a regional issue. It's a national issue. But what I will say is when you see that our blue dot is farther right, I think even though everyone is feeling that, people are seeing in our community that there's less it's still a crisis, but it's not as impactful as maybe some of the other cities are experiencing around us.
And it's the disconnect between sentiment versus data. Those can be wildly different.
Right. And then on the ease of getting around by public transportation, you're extrapolating what you think the public is saying in these things, but is GoZone seen as a form of public transportation? That may be, are people who don't use GoZone or don't use buses or don't use the trains, are they thinking, well, I don't see buses in my community, so therefore I'm just saying there's no public transit? Are they seeing that as a form of public transit? We have just done tours of a nonprofit where there are, homeless teens that live in our community, and GoZone is a game changer for them because they can get around at 75 cents a ride as being a student, where they can't do that in any other city that doesn't have that. So I struggle with, and you'll see with some of our goals for attacking some of these things and trying to have a growth mindset of making improvements, is maybe there's a perception issue there that we need to focus on rather than the service. And if we can tackle that, if we don't see any movement on that, maybe there is a question in the future, but again, it goes to those trends and what that really means.
To your point, I'm looking at the appendix now, trying to understand more the who's saying what about what. I see the living wage breakout by demographic. I was curious about the affordable housing breakout by demographic. I don't think I've seen that in here. Because one of the things that comes to my mind is I remember years ago, the millennials were also talking about, well, I want to invest in memories and I want to travel. I just want a little house. And now I think they're saying, well, you know what, that's not a great way to get older. And I'm wondering how much of that demographic is now trying to buy a house, but hadn't saved for the house, and they're going, no, it's not affordable. Well, maybe it was some decisions that were made, maybe not just that demographic overall, but people invested in things one way for 10 years. Now they want to buy a house, but don't have any way to buy a house. I'm trying to understand those numbers. Am I just missing that somewhere?
No, you're not missing it. It actually wasn't included. We can look at our reports. I think it wasn't put in the presentation, but if we have it, we'll send it to you.
Thank you.
And if you don't have it, I'll get it to you to send that out. Yeah, for sure. And
I wasn't picking on millennials. That just popped into my head first. So,
no
love
worries,
millennials.
no worries at all. And Mayor, to your point on the differences here of perception and the actual data, I think that's really important to point out. A lot of what we're trying to do here is figure out, is this a performance issue, something where we need to make changes on our performance, or is this a perception issue and we need to change the way we're communicating? And I think that GoZone is a great example. How are we communicating this out to the folks in our community, and how do we measure that perception change as our communication strategies start to shift?
Can we, don't you think some additional public education on GoZone and stuff would be helpful? Because the vast majority of people that I talk to, believe it or not, they really think GoZone is another Lyft or Uber.
Mm-hmm.
They do not know the difference.
Yeah.
And
that's-
the vast difference in
Yeah.
fees.
And the structure,
Yes.
for example. No, it's definitely a challenge that the agency is addressing and working towards. Once people get involved with the system, they totally get it, they understand it. But yes, they, even to the point of like not realizing that it's not curb to curb. That you have to walk to a virtual bus stop at the end of your neighborhood. You can't just get them right to the front door. We get that all the time. But once people understand, oh no, this is a shared ride. This is then it works. But yeah, there's a little bit more of a barrier. There's that impression of that even in people who are in the business of transit, there is a mindset sometimes that transit is a vehicle type and not moving people.
Right.
Right. And so you get into that kind of a mindset as well. Quick question, where was this survey promoted? Was it only Facebook? Was it, what other channels did we use?
Yeah, so we use any online methods through panel advertising agencies. So it's a partnership with those advertising best practices to reach out to that broad census demographic information. So we use things like Facebook, things like the Bible app, things like mobile games, basically anywhere where people are online, we can put our panel advertisements. What we really do is look at the city of Lewisville and figure out where people are spending their time online and target those areas.
And I'm sorry, I don't know if I saw this. Did we have a breakdown of what channels were most popular, most effective, anything like that?
We don't. The reason for that is our team of survey methodologists are constantly pulling levers based on the traffic in different areas. It's really hard for us to document exactly who's coming from which method, but I can pull some of that data for you if that's something you'd like to see, Mayor.
I'd be interested just because, as we know, various social media platforms skew messaging in
Right.
certain ways. Some are much more positive than others.
Right, exactly. And to give you an example, let's say there's something that blows up on X and suddenly we see a lot of people on X, where we start to shift our methodology to X, and then maybe 20 minutes later there's something happening on YouTube. We'll switch our methodology accordingly so that we're constantly going with the trends that we're finding.
So it's much more about getting eyeballs than it is about the channel that you're using.
Correct,
Okay.
Yep.
And is there a way that we are able to decipher, to make sure that we're not getting multiple responses from the same person?
Yes, we do not collect multiple responses from the same person. We have, baseline gates and guardrails around that about IP addresses and digital fingerprints. We take that one step further. There's types of online data. It gets really techie and really in the weeds that give people similar responses, and our system will flag that and remove any suspected duplicates from the survey responses.
I love that, yeah, because I was thinking, well, could somebody be on multiple platforms and submitting responses, on each platform, but that is.
Yeah.
if it's
There
a-
is no such
that
thing
is-
as anonymity.
that's
It's a lie
amazing.
when they tell you it's anonymous. It's an absolute lie.
That's not what Signal says.
I want to go into some of those open-ended questions that we did also ask in this survey. So the question we asked here, and we let residents respond in, is what's the number one thing you think Lewisville government does well? And 2025 being the year of community engagement, it looks like you guys nailed it. That was the number one thing that we got from residents, is that you do community engagement as well, or do community engagement very well. And then public administration was the second one. So using city services, government management, responsiveness, the public services that you guys provide, and public safety just below that as the number 3 there, with law enforcement, emergency services, public safety. So these were some of the top things that we see from folks in Lewisville.
So I mean, I think that's very interesting that we scored so highly on the community engagement, but we also had, the ability for residents to give input to the Lewisville city government was maybe not low, but, an 18% negative response on that. That's only a 55% positive score on that, but then the community engagement at 29%. So I don't know if that's telling me two different things. Not quite sure what to think about that.
Yeah, and I think looking at the benchmark score on that ability to give input is exactly what I want to highlight there. You guys are doing much better than any other community on this type of question. So I think the scores by themselves out of context can look a little bit low, and it can look like, well, 18% don't feel that way. Think about those who have never contacted you or don't really ever think about contacting you. There are a lot of folks in our community that just don't engage in local government, and that might be where some of those negative responses are coming from. But if they need to, they know how to do it, and they feel like you are very responsive in getting that data. So again, I don't want to look at those percentages as the raw numbers. I really think putting them in context with the benchmarks and with that open-ended response is essential.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Then we asked, what's the number one thing you think the Lewisville government could do to improve its services? So no community is perfect. How could we continue to improve? And the number one response here was on infrastructure maintenance, specifically around roads, medians, and municipal maintenance in general. We also had environmental and public cleanliness, so waste management being the top thing there and public cleanliness following. And then housing and assistance programs, affordable housing, rental assistance, homeless assistance. These are all areas that I know Claire and the team have looked at pretty extensively and have some suggestions on how we continue to address and improve these services.
How do these stack up with peer cities?
Yeah, so I think when we're looking at all of these, if we go back a little bit and look at those benchmarking data, that's going to give us the best input. So really trying to look at all of this in context. I mean, for example, your affordable housing, we've already talked about that before, but with that benchmark being still higher than a national and cohort average, there's still work to be done, but we're doing pretty well when we look at other communities. We can continue to improve in that area, but we are a standout community there.
Gotcha. I get that it's not one-to-one, that there's a
Right.
trend though, okay.
Right.
I think the other interesting thing on the infrastructure, where roads were the top portion of the infrastructure maintenance. So to me, I would immediately think I need to fix roads, but we're going to have a presentation later on infrastructure, and our PCI rating for roads is 85. It is one of the highest in the Metroplex. In fact, there's not a single public works director who has seen an 85 average in a city. So what that makes me think of, I'm just, again, extrapolation on this is we do have some roads that, like a lot of the old town roads, we've got capital projects going to happen in there, right, over the next couple of years. So those things will bring that up even more, but we know there's some roads that need work. But on the other hand, we have a lot of TxDOT roads. We have a lot of roads that there's not a lot of maintenance cleaning on because, we have taken up I-35 and we've taken up maintenance along Business 121. We haven't done it on some of the other state roads. So just food for thought.
I was just going to say that's another case in where I would really be interested to see the geographic data of where the responses are coming from, because I do think that if there's some maintenance issues probably in and around somebody's immediate neighborhood, that they're going to be kind of reporting that as being something that we really could improve. But also, I've just in my time being on planning and zoning and council, I have my conclusion has been that there is a large number of people who don't understand the difference between TxDOT and the city. And also, and for the portion of people who do know who TxDOT is, and that's the state versus the city, they don't understand. They're like, okay, well, 35 is the state. Maybe 121, but they don't understand how many roads that we have that are thoroughfares through the city that are actually state roads as well. So I would be really, really interested to see that geographic data I think that would shed more light on this particular part for me as well.
I think another place where I think we could be seeing an interesting conflict of objectives here is that I think we do a really good job of announcing when we're going to repair roads. I see this on Facebook all the time. We're repairing this alley, repairing this road. So it's out there. Lots of people are very aware of it. So I think if you measure this against a city that never publishes when they're going to be making these changes, it might not seem like they have as big a problem. So I don't want to change anything. I think it's great that we announced that, but it could just be people are hyper aware of what we're doing because we advertise it. And I think it's the right thing to do, but
And I think the other thing is people are hyper aware of roads in general. It's something that everyone engages with, and everyone has seen a pothole somewhere at some point in their life, even in the best maintained communities. So people do love to express kind of negative emotions around roads, no matter where it is. I still don't think this is a number that is super concerning in my book. Now, if we saw that number skew over time to be 60, 70% people saying that roads are a concern, I would definitely start to prioritize it even more. Yeah.
When I look at this, it's, I mean, how many residents are interacting with financial and resource management? How many residents are interacting with traffic and transportation? I mean, so when you look at these, yeah, these are the things that they're most likely to interact with, so they're most likely to post about it. So there's some of that happens, I think, also when we're looking at the methodology behind this. Thank you.
The last thing I'll say on this slide is it's very, very rare for me to see people actually saying that they wouldn't change anything about the community, and having 5% of people say that they wouldn't make a change. That's not just people leaving this blank. It's actually people writing in and saying, I'm really happy with everything. I wouldn't suggest any changes at this time. So incredible job. Claire's going to chime in a little bit. If you remember, we went through that strategic framework. So we did the part of reaching residents through this community survey, and you guys now have that data. And a lot of today is going to be focused on understanding the data, acting on that data. And Claire and I came up with some suggestions here.
Yeah, so, you know, although we have good numbers, and I'm very pleased to see a lot of these things, we in Lewisville pride ourselves on having a growth mindset. So the intent is to make all these numbers look better next year and to keep track of trends and see if we're going in the right direction. The other thing I've learned, especially with employee surveys recently, is that the best thing to do is to find one or two things that we can really hyper focus on, that we want to put our efforts on. So for me, and maybe council doesn't agree, but to me, I thought the public transportation numbers, especially when we have really good resources, could be a big bang for our buck if we partnered with DCTA, and so our act would be coordinating with DCTA on a communication strategy where it's not just DCTA, but we can amplify their voice as well in communication, and maybe working with our social service agencies, our businesses, those types of things to make sure people understand how all of this, how the system works. The other one was with cleanliness. So I think we have made strides in the last couple of years, but putting a lot more resources towards cleanup. I think I-35 looks better than it has in a long time. I think Business 121 does too. But really, if we're going to focus our efforts, is similar to what you guys have been asking, is how do we break that down geographically? Is there a key area that people are really more unhappy about the way things look? And then maybe we're putting more efforts into that, and the cleanliness in there and the cleanup there. Those are my two suggestions, but we're open. If there's anything else that council would like us to focus on in the upcoming budget year related to this survey, we're all ears.
Council?
I feel you're pretty much on target there. We're a data-driven city, and we need to listen to the data.
Okay.
I do have a question, not so much to that, Claire, but I went back and looked at slide number 10. We have 540 valid responses. We're 140,000 people in the city. That's 18 and under, and that's everything. Did we have a goal for 540, and how close were we to meeting that goal? What was a goal for respondents, and how close were we?
So we do a mathematical calculation based on the different demographic groups and the proportions of people that we need to find to make our survey data significant. 500 was your goal there. So you did meet the goal. Okay. And that's not just 500 stagnant, that's 500 every time we run this survey. And as Claire stated, we already are in a next phase where we can start to measure change in these areas.
Great, thank you.
So Claire, I had a question because I was also in that DCTA board meeting yesterday, and so one question that I was, as they were talking about their social media strategies and them posting, you know, updates and the stories and all the things on social media, are they able to post on an official city, like, Lewisville staff or Lewisville City Hall? Are they able to do that? And if not, when you talk about coordinating with DCTA, I mean, it would be great if they were, they were able to send their stuff to us, and then Lewisville City Hall could push that out, or, so it's coming through our official channels as well, because I think there's probably a lot of people in the community that may be following the city's pages, but they're not following DCTA's page.
Yes, so the answer is they cannot post directly, but we can absolutely, that was the idea behind that. And then I think also like creative ideas that we can, we have a team that excels in creating videos and things like that as well, and how can we leverage, if this is a priority of council over the next year, that may change directions on some of the projects that our communications team is working on as well. But I agree.
I would love to see a partnership there. I think there's probably a group of people within the community that don't use public transportation, don't plan on using public transportation, that would probably not go follow DCTA's page and get those updates from them. So just having it out to our general, I think that might also help, DCTA as well, drive some ridership as well. So I would love to see that partnership.
Yes, ma'am. And that's the last of our presentation. If there's any other comments, the rest of it's appendix information.
Council? All right. With that, thank you, Zencity. We really appreciate that. We appreciate the data-focused way we do things. So with that, we're going to go ahead and take about a 12-minute bio break. Yeah, right? Oddly specific. But we will return at 10:29.
10:29.